May I have your attention to announce the Cyber Commanders panel? Our distinguished commanders will be introduced and moderated by none other than the former commander of US Cyber Command and Director of National Security Agency, Admiral Michael Rogers. Mike Rogers, yes, applause will be in order. Applause is in order because Mike Rogers retired from the US Navy in 2018 after almost 37 years of naval service, rising to the rank of 4-star admiral. He culminated his career with a 4-year tour as the commander of US Cyber Command and Director of National Security Agency. In this position, Admiral Rogers was in charge of creating the DoD's newest competent command and running the US government's largest intelligence organization. Currently, retired Admiral Rogers is supporting companies in the private sector, serving as a member or a senior advisor in various boards. Here at the CCDCOE, we are very proud to have Mike Rogers as one of our advisory board members. So, Admiral Rogers, I will hereby give you the command of the Commanders panel.
I have the con and I have the deck, as we say in the United States Navy. Well, thank you all for being here today and participating. Thank you to our fellow panel members. I'll introduce the panel. What we thought we would do is each will provide an overview of their respective nation's efforts in the cyber arena and how their organization fits into that. Then we'll have a discussion amongst the four of us. And we'll conclude then with time for the audience to ask questions for the panel on any topic that you would like. So first, let me introduce the panel. To my left, Lieutenant General Ludwig Leinhos, who is currently head of the German Cyber and Information Space Command. His background, expertise in electronic warfare, information technology, C3, and signals intelligence. Continuing down, Brigadier General Maria Biank, a signal officer in the United States Army, currently the J6 at US European Command in Stuttgart in Germany. Prior to this current tour was the J3, or the Director of Operations for US Army Cyber. And lastly, at the end, Brigadier General Francesco Vestito, a tornado pilot, who currently is the commander of the Joint Command for Cyber Operations, and prior to his current tour, was leading the Center for Defense Innovation. So to my three panel members, thank you very much for your willingness. And if I could, we'll just start down the line. Ludwig, we'll let you start it off.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mike, inviting me to this distinguished panel, and it's always a pleasure to be back here in Tallinn. I would like to start with a quote that also was mentioned by Admiral Nielsen already, by NATO from the Warsaw Summit communique in 2016. We recognize cyberspace as a domain of operations in which NATO must defend itself as effectively as it does in the air, on land, and at sea. And this brings us immediately to the new dimension and what distinguishes the military dimension of cyber and information space from traditional operational domains. Despite the complexity that you can argue for all domains, there's one thing that you have to mention in the beginning. It's that territoriality is complemented by virtual reality. And cyber and information space cannot be divided into combat sectors with clear spatial boundaries. That's a significant difference. The same is true for maneuvering of troops or counting troops and divisions. This is not the same in the dimension of cyber. And also, but you must not let yourselves be fooled by the term virtual. In cyber and information space too, physical effects can be achieved. However, the place where cyber and information domain operations create an effect can theoretically be tens of thousands of kilometers away from where the action was initiated. That's also a difference. Time, too, has a different meaning in cyber and information space. For example, an effect can be achieved over any distance without delay. So effects are achieved in real time. So all of these things and the growing digitalization has resulted in the German Bundeswehr to establish a new service as a consequence out of these developments. This service is called Cyber and Information Domain Service, and it was inaugurated in April 2017. What we have done in a nutshell, we have centralized the core of the J2 and J6 capabilities of the Bundeswehr with a J3 flavor, to put it in a very short words. This 6 German Armed Forces service comprises roughly about 14,000 soldiers and civilian employees. So by doing this, we took a reaction on the importance of this new domain, but we are also contributing to a national security provision with it. We have, by intention, made this service a little bit broader from content than the NATO definition, because we have also included the information space. So that is an important effect, not just dealing with the technical aspects of cyber, but also what is done within these techniques, the information that is perceived in different ways and is also an important factor. We have established already our own situation center for the cyber and information domain space domain. A valid situation picture, providing the basis for options for action and synergies, is generated by merging situation reports from all areas that may be relevant for the cyber and information domain. So with this situational picture, we can actively support the idea of future joint force, in which a joint operational commander is enabled to achieve desired effects throughout all domains, be it sea, land, air, space, and cyber information domain. So there may be future consequences that may result in establishment, for example, on cyber and information domain component commands or something like this, like we have in the other domains. In addition to these clearly military aspects, we are looking on close national and international cooperation, because I strongly believe that cyberspace plays an outstanding role in today's understanding of NATO's overall deterrence and defense posture. We have the military capabilities for national cyber operations available, and Germany is, pending on a national political and legal mandate, in general willing to contribute to NATO-led operations, also with regard to the cyber domain. NATO, as well as NATO member states, have to be completely aware of their cyberspace, to understand minute by minute the state of our networks so that commanders can rely on them. We have to deepen our close bilateral cooperation, as well as our cooperation at European Union and NATO levels. Close dialogue is essential at the international level, since the cyber and information space is not a respecter of national boundaries. But we have also the national cooperation. And from German perspective, this is based on the German federal government cybersecurity strategy, which was published in 2016. Already in 2011, we established, under the lead of the Minister of Interior, a National Cyber Defense Center. Since then, it served as a forum for cooperation between the various actors, government bodies in the cyber and information domain. This center is currently being developed into an interministerial operational institution involving all key stakeholders, a crucial, important step to ensure Germany's future capacity to act in this field. Our national cyber and information domain service is already closely connected with all key authorities and government agencies. We have also entered into our first partnerships with academic and business institutions, for example, with internet service providers, with German Telekom, but also with research institutes, for example, Fraunhofer Institute. In summary, only together, nationally and internationally, can we guarantee resistance to threats from the cyber and information space, which is an essential requirement for future development and welfare of modern societies. And my service will make a significant contribution to achieve this important task. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ludwig. Maria.
Good morning, Maria Biank from United States European Command. It's been an honor to be asked to be here. I certainly appreciate it. My first visit to Tallinn and Estonia, so it's been wonderful, and I certainly appreciate the hospitality. Admiral Rogers mentioned just one of my three jobs. So my first job really is a very traditional J6 job, and that deals with what I would call operations and plans, communications, satellite communications, terrestrial communications. We focus on interoperability. We work very closely with NATO, and obviously we do quite a bit with exercises. I have a second job that's, it takes not much of my time, but a little bit. It's the Chief Information Officer for the theater, the European theater, and that is really the governance and policy. There's different laws and regulations of what we can put on our networks, and it's just part of our layered defense mechanism. I spend most of my time on the third job, which is the commander of the Joint Cyber Center. And the Joint Cyber Center plans, coordinates, synchronizes, and integrates cyberspace operations throughout the European theater. This is a significant lift. I have a great team of folks that assist with this. And what's, I think, a little unusual for European Command as a combatant command is that this organization, the Joint Cyber Center, actually works directly for our Director of Operations at European Command, so the J3. I have the position of J6 has an additional duty as the Deputy J3 for Cyber. And that we use the Joint Cyber Center as a mechanism to do that. That takes up a little over half of our time when dealing with the many threats and vulnerabilities and that sort of thing. Our goal with the Joint Cyber Center is to normalize cyber operations. And what I mean by that is to treat cyber like we treat any other domain. Air, land, sea. We use the processes that we already have in place at the command, at the headquarters, and we use those processes for cyber. We don't develop new processes, and that at times, that has been maturing over the last few years. I'd say we're probably we're well into that. We exercise like that, but most importantly, we work day to day as an integrated element out of the J3 shop. And what I mean by that is that, so there's a targeting process like any other domain. Well, cyber's part of that targeting process. There's a process for, staffing certain things, making decisions. There's a whole process. There's a whole battle rhythm process, battle rhythm events that we have integrated cyber. So cyber isn't the trailer on, hooked to a car or something like that. Cyber is completely integrated. And that allows us to provide a common operating picture as best we can. There's much growth to be done there in terms of a cyber common operating picture. It allows us to assess risk in terms of what commanders would understand. It allows us to assess and develop mitigating strategies to mitigate those risks. And we do that best by emphasizing quite frankly, collaboration and coalition building. We share a lot of our information. We work very hard to do that. We have a cyber information sharing cell, exchange cell, quite frankly. We've had a lot of luck getting things, important information down to the lowest possible common denominator classification-wise. And we have a great partnership with NATO, allies, and other partner nations to do that. We also have a cyber analytics team that shares at the unclassified level using Threat Connect and Slack. And that team has had great success also in sharing the information. And the purpose of sharing that information is to provide common situational awareness as well as a common understanding of network defense. And so we've had much luck in that. We're the only combatant command to do something like that. So the cyber information exchange cell as well as the cyber analytics team. And so we realize that the best defense is a collaborative defense. It's a common defense, a common posture that we all understand the adversary, the threats against our different networks, our different nation states. And so we understand that value. And it's quite frankly, it's a full-time job. And we've got a good team at U.S. European Command to do that.
Francesco.
Thank you for the opportunity. The CCD Center of Excellence has given Italy the Minister of Defense to represent, and I bring the regards of the CHOD, General Vecciarelli, who is my authority in direct line of command through the Ministry of Defense. And we are here because Italy is one of the supporting nations. Thanks a lot to the director of the center, the great support you give to the cyber community. I'll bring in my experience in the next 10 minutes on what I do and what my role is. 3 years ago, I was given the task to build a cyber command by scratch. My attitude was, I know I have to build a cake, which I don't know what the cake is going to look like. I have some ingredients. 3 years later now, I realize I know which cake I need to make. I still don't have all the ingredients, so it's quite interesting. And there was a chef in meat, and they said, build cakes. And so my real duty here is, my background is a tornado pilot. I'll bring some considerations on commander control, role of industry, recruitment, the use of range, and the legal studies. This is what I'll do in the next 7-8 minutes. Believe it or not, I have 3,000 plus hours on the tornado, air-to-ground role, the very first one leaving the formation there. And when they gave me this task, I came in an environment, and what I'll bring in today is the perspective of having an operational background and doing cyber. 3,000 plus hours on Tornado, 0 knowledge on networks, clouds, and all the things you say. Which brings the first consideration. Cyber operations is really an operational art, using the principle of wars to design your campaign. One day you can go low, the next day high, in the dark, daylight, in the clouds, and you need to think tactically like your enemy is thinking of you. This is the perspective I bring in my zero knowledge of CIS, with all the respect with technicians. And after all, it's a teamwork, and you need to bring together all these perspectives. Why? Because as a bomber, I had a task, an effect to produce, standing 10 hours to understand how to penetrate the lines, get there alive, produce some effects, come back through the same line of defense. People were even more mad than a few hours before in that case. Land, measure the effects, plan again, and do something else. This is just a cyber operation. And my command in Italy takes care of the military domain, the information and the network in Italy, and wherever we have military operations. If the nation calls upon, I'll be ready with my command to participate to the support of the defense of the nation. That's why, without going into details, in Italy, the cyber domain is an intelligence-driven organization. The services are in charge. I'm the brown part on the right-hand side of the screen. I do look at the military domain, and I give all the support I can. On the left-hand side, there are people with CERTs, incident response team, taking care of the public administration and the private companies. We all fuse all this information in a single point of fusion, which is the DIS, Department for Intelligence, and they refer to the Prime Minister. Also, there's a connection between me and the military intelligence and the national intelligence. So I only take care of this, and my only duty is cyber defense. This is written in the books. I'll be ready to do operations in the theater with an appropriate legal framework, which is probably the most complicated activity I'm facing in the past 3 years, which is there are rules and laws to obey too. Tallinn manual in 600 pages pretty much says, keep in mind you have a civil law, a common law, share the principles in it, but come out with a national concept on how to do legally cyber operation. And I'm very grateful to the expertise we have in Tallinn, and we are doing the same in my nation. And it's easy. I only have to take care of command and control and have a deployable cell able to go somewhere in the theater and fix things. The geek guys with a mix of intelligence, experts, operational guys. The physical world has changed. I was able to recognize ships, tanks in few seconds from 20 miles away. what I need to scope now my attention on is there's a digital domain under every single platform. And this is the focus of my team. It's not just a matter of IT, it's the OT behind the things that make and produce cyber effect in the theater. That's why the main scope of the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Defense has declared this is resilience and dual use. Why resilience? Because we need to have platforms, equipment, tools to work efficiently. And how do we make this work efficiently? We need to understand that resilience is a matter of how we do things at night. In the air domain, we could send a Raiden 5 a couple of jets to respond to the threats. Now it's a matter of milliseconds. And that's why we need to produce a cadre of young experts who have to operate in this domain. Recruitment is the most important thing. We have touched this recently. I think we need to intercept those high school guys who are about to approach the professional attitude and the university. We cannot wait for a full cycle of universities to pick up just 2 or 3 guys. We need to intercept this digital generation which is there. And the last recruitment I've made was picking up 17, 18 years old guys. Dual use means how to communicate command and control. Yes, it's too easy for me to take care of the military domain in my command, but I need to keep in mind that there's a national oversight picture that looks at the cyber domain. So soon, in a matter of seconds, we need to transit the operational picture, which used to be the one of land, air, maritime. Now there's a cyber picture we need to transfer to whoever is the chief in command of that operation that night. Why? Because with my operational background, I kind of understood with my people that there's an hybrid side of the cyber warfare, which, of course, we talk every day, but which is capitalizing on psychological warfare, everything, let's say, crime, espionage, and terrorism. And probably someone doesn't have any interest in going to cyber warfare. And so we need to get together with the civil society and transmit what I would call the tactical attitude of the military camouflaged people in defending networks and the nation and the domain we are protecting. How do we do this? The same as I was trained on a tornado, let's discuss range. Ranges are popping up here and there. We have used the range for the locked shield. We have our own range in Italy called Unavox, done by the great company Leonardo with a bunch of universities. We have some representatives here. All I want to point out is range is not just a matter of IT. We need to teach our guys 24 hours 7 how to protect the military domain. That's why we need to discuss the military operational technology, which is we need to have a multiple stakeholders, multiple end users, heterosystem cyber range, which is able to train on the military platforms, avionics, naval, satellites, and so on. Academia, the young guys who are going to become the cyber operators, and the small, big industries who are the real tissue of the nations. And that's why we are concentrating on this. On the experience of Locked Shield, we are preparing our multi-stakeholders exercise in Italy, and we use this range as well. I'm closing down with this. E stands, with all the respect for the scientist who came out with this, is if you want to protect your environment, energy, and so on, you have to make your own C2. And so we are bringing here today, we're going to discuss this with University of Genova, and Modena and Reggio Emilia are the 2 universities doing cyber science and masters for us. I think we need to bring our tactical intuition, the military one, in exercising the experiments that protect our networks. We need to know exactly right now what is running in our networks, so we think the same way the enemy adversary is what I bring in, cyber range. We need to give the guys, the operators, a system which is even open at night to practice the less likely scenario, the most dangerous scenario. Also procurement. We need to produce cyber operators for industry because I've flown a jet for 40 years, the Tornado, who has gone through 6, 7 lifts, an update. I think we need to have teams who work pretty much from 3-5 years time span in procurement, so that when a team is building the new capability, another team is going to think in the next 10 years. Also, electronic force protection. We are concentrating on CIMA because there's an environment which is really hybrid. It's the mix of networks and electronic warfare. We have a very tight connection with the special forces, PSYOPs, and so on, and InfoOps. Close down, resilience, dual use. If you look at the same picture in the nation, then no matter what, everyone is looking at the same situation. I think this is pretty much it. By the end of this year, my command will have the full operational capability. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Francesco. So you have each laid out a structure and approach, if you will, to the military execution of cyber. Slightly different. One has gone the service route. Two, I would argue, have kind of gone with traditional joint kind of structure. I'm going to give you a minute to think. I'm going to ask you about assessing where you think you are. When I was a commander, what I used to tell my bosses, our chief of defense, the secretary, and our political leadership was, I thought there were 4 keys to our ability to execute military operations in cyber. So number 1, we have to develop the technical means to actually execute defense and offense. Number 2, we have to generate the capacity in the form of a trained workforce that's dedicated to apply these capabilities to maximum effectiveness. Number 3, we need to make sure that we've got the operational processes and structures in place with a well-defined command and control structure that both the cyber side as well as the broader operational construct that cyber is a part of all understand. And then lastly, we need to make sure we have clearly articulated legal and policy frameworks that actually allow us to execute our cyber activities within a legal and policy framework that everyone understands and has accepted. So if you look at those kind of criteria, do you have the technical capabilities? Do you have the people with enough and the right training? Do you have the kind of operational processes and well-defined command and control? And do you have the legal and policy authorities you think you need? If you use those criteria, how would you kind of grade where you are right now in your journey? Ludwig, I'll ask you first.
Yeah, let me first start with the main thought. When you're looking at the military organizations, for every domain, the classical domains, you have established a service. So we have now a new domain. That was rationale to establish for this new domain also a service. Not just that we have a service, but that you have the preconditions to do the things that you are only authorized if you're at a service level. That starts with getting the right people to train and educate the people. Mm-hmm. This is in our system depending on a service level to have a significant influence. Also to development of capabilities. So since we are a relatively young organization, 2 years now in stage, I think we are on a very good path. We are not at the target at the moment, but I don't think we will ever be. So it will be a constant process. But with the organizational setup, we have brought the preconditions for the things that we can do as the military. Concerning more the legal side, and I think there are still a lot of debates in a lot of nations. This brings me to the scenarios. Because looking in future scenarios, we had previously classical military scenarios. You have at a certain point in time a declaration of war or whatever. We have now to face with scenarios where we have probably conflicts that are below the threshold of a formal declared war or tension. And there you have different questions now. What means by what organization can be used in these type of conflicts? And I think there's still discussion to be needed on a national basis, but also international basis. How to deal with these things? Who can execute certain things? What is the legal basis for this? So these hybrid scenarios, I think, is an area where all the nations still have need a discussion internally, depending on the legal setup.
Right. Maria, where would you say you are in your journey?
Sir, so I think from a technical means and a generating capacity perspective, we have, the U.S. has invested quite a bit in those two areas. We train, our cyber mission forces are trained to a joint standard. That standard is determined by U.S. Cyber Command, as you well know, sir. We are...
An inspired idea, I thought.
Absolutely. And so I think that really makes us very, very unique. So a commander gets, an Air Force commander gets an Army team on an Air Force network. It's the same standard. So that's a big part of it. Our challenge, quite frankly, on the technical and generating capacity side is there is fierce competition for this talent. That's probably our biggest challenge. How do you recruit and as you train and then retain the talent is significant. And each of the services, Department of Defense have several programs in place to get after that. From the perspective of the operational processes, I think we're in a better place than we were when I worked at JFHQ Joint Forces Headquarters Doden a few years ago, as we were standing that organization up as the defensive mechanism, if you will, for defending Department of Defense networks. And so we're in a lot better place with that. I would offer that will always have to grow. That will always mature. And especially as your fourth point, sir, was the legal side of this, the policy framework piece. I think the U.S. Has made great strides. There's great momentum right now when it comes to the full spectrum of cyberspace operations. We are seeing it in our national defense strategy. We're seeing it in our national military strategy. We're seeing it in our national security strategy. Very important. This is overarching cyber operation guidance. These are national level strategies. These are not just focused on cyber. Now, we also have cyber strategy. The Department of Defense has a cyber strategy. There's a national cyber strategy that further delineates and gets more into the nuts and bolts of certain things. So I think we've made really great strides, in that. We've worked, the U.S. Has worked very hard in terms of a whole of government perspective. And specifically for the DoD, getting additional authorities in place so that we can be timely and relevant in the cyberspace operation. So I will offer that, just like General Leinhos said, it's a constant. It is something that is a constant process. These things, and so as something changes, there's a refinement and adjustment to these four areas. But I'll offer a grade just because. So I think we're probably at a B+, and I think we're doing well.
Great. Francesco.
Yes, thanks a lot for this question. From a philosophic Socratic point of view, this is an environment where I've realized that the more you know, the more you realize you don't know everything in this. And with this paradox, I think that the major point I need to face every day is convince the leadership, the decision maker, that you are doing something good. And you have to make them understand the decision they have to make. So, as the President well laid out a few minutes ago, we need to establish clearly a flow of decision-making activities which goes from United Nations, international law, is it an act of war or not? And tell our leadership that we need to act or react. And this is the first thing we are trying to face this year. So I'm working with my legal team. Luckily, I have a representative here in CCDCOE, Center of Excellence, and try to get together. And I have another Italian lawyer, expert in legal activities. And what we need to try to understand is we need to have a clear, defined C2 command and control legal with a legal background that tells the decision maker act. Now, what we are trying to do also is, when I said at first I had the ingredients, all I had was very expert technical guys, very low ranks coming from every single service. Nowadays, what I'm missing is guys who are very expert, but that have an operational overview on things, how to conduct military operations. That's why we need to have the J2, 3, 5, 6 series with a bit of 1 and 7, able to design and shaping how we act our professional education in order to conduct military operation. And how I'm trying to do this? Trying to get together with the operational tactical level, PsyOps, special ops, every single air, land, maritime domain, so that we produce effects which are explainable to our military leadership. And I think we are pretty much at a good stage, and this is the most demanding part, producing a legal framework and an operational design of the military operation.
Very good. So we've talked about the different structures or approaches you have each taken. We've talked about, so where do you feel you are in your journey? You know, clearly the military piece is just one part of a much broader component for governments. And so my next question really is, so how does the work that you were doing from a military perspective fit into the broader national effort that each of your respective nations is attempting to execute in cyber? Francesco, I'm going to ask you to take this one first.
You didn't give me time to think.
You're a tornado guy. You don't need time to think. Come on.
And luckily, I'm a tornado guy. They already have the answer for me.
You don't even have to answer. That's good.
Sorry, I was thinking to the next question. Luckily, in my nation, I have a good framework with a national strategy on how to do things and take care of the legal background which supports cyber operation. The main framework is designed on democracy and transparency and rule of law. And I'm a part of it. The great consideration to bring in is to build trust between the military world and the civilian worlds. Educate the people, let the people of the nation, all millions of people understand that the cyber is a real threat, that finally someone has got the tool to reach directly the center of gravity that Clausewitz said, with the instrument that Sun Tzu, thousands of years ago, said, don't even come to a war, just control the enemy. And so we need people to understand that someone is probably in the networks, is doing some harm already, and we'll see the effects probably in a matter of years. So I think it's a matter of communicating trust in the nation, everyone staying in its institutional role.
Maria, same.
So I think whole of government is a key piece of this. Admiral Wheeler mentioned in his keynote speech about the defense of the U.S. midterm November 2018 elections. And I think that was we did quite a bit there, and there was a whole of government we learned. In the Department of Defense and that type of thing is that we're in a supporting role. So we support the Department of Homeland Security. We support the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. So that is a supporting role that's clearly defined. And so I think that's kind of how I would see it. We also, though, in the Department of Defense, we still interact with other interagency partners across our government. And I think the fact that we have published strategies at the national and Department of Defense level, we get very clear policy guidance in terms of cyberspace operations. Our legislative arm, our Congress, has also passed certain authorities as part of our National Defense Authorization Act for 2019. And that ensures that all of us, and especially U.S. Cyber Command, can quite frankly, operate at the speed of cyber to be timely and to be relevant. And so when it comes to the cyberspace operations at a national level, it is a very collaborative whole of government approach, and it takes a lot of work because sometimes that's not always clear, and it takes a lot of teaming. It's very much a team sport.
Ludwig.
Yeah, I think what Maria mentioned, the whole of government approach is vital in that domain. But it's also a difference of this domain to the other classical military domains, I think. And this is reflected in Germany in the government's cybersecurity strategy that has been published in 2016 under the lead of the Minister of Interior. And the core body to reflect this whole of government approach is this National Cyber Defense Center, where we have all the institutions that have a role on cybersecurity in Germany under one roof. So that is including my organization, but it's also including the intelligence services, it's including the criminal office, it's including the Federal Office for IT Security, and all the major players. And the most important thing is, I think, you have to get at a government level situational awareness. And there's a lot of entities contributing to this that are not all under the lead of the Ministry of Defense. Yeah. So this is the basis for any action that you might intend to do, and also to get the resilience. And this, therefore, this defense center, where we are part of it, is for us a crucial element, and we have to look how we further evolve this, what has to be done to get this in a kind of operational flavor to act at a state level to certain threats.
Good. One of the themes we've talked about broadly so far in some of the opening comments this morning is how cyber really is the ultimate team activity, that it takes multiple expertise, multiple different organizations. So I'd like to focus on partners and teammates for a moment. So I'd like you to talk about who are your key partners, and I'd specifically ask you, can you talk specifically, as you talk about who your partners are, can you specifically talk about the role of industry with what you're trying to do, and the role of the academic world? So Ludwig, I'll ask you.
Good. I start with the partners, of course. I think international cooperation, of course, is mandatory and necessary, be it under the classical organizations, NATO and European Union, for many reasons, in order to standardize, to harmonize, to establish processes, so that we have a mutual understanding. If you're using certain words that not one nation is understanding A and the other nation is understanding B. So there's a lot of reasons for international cooperation. This has to be done on an organizational basis, but also, I think, on a bilateral basis. We are doing both of it. On the national level, industry, I think, is an important factor as well, because there's a lot of things where we are already depending on industry, because industry is providing our capabilities. That's one thing. But also, if you're looking, the internet service providers, for example, they have the key to do certain things. It's not in our hands. So we need also to consider how we involve in a whole of government approach at least some key industries, and that's a discussion that we are also taking on, specifically the internet service providers. In order to be able to provide resilience and to react, right, we need them as well. Academia is another important thing, because the academia is driving where our capabilities will go in the future, and we have established, for example, at the university in Munich, an institution where we bring academia, industry, university training together, right, in order to foster these topics as well.
Maria, about teammates for you?
So when it comes to partners, NATO, the alliance there, other European Union that are not NATO partners necessarily, that are not part of NATO rather, are key for us. Any ally in Europe is very key, and as I mentioned earlier, we do a lot in terms of information sharing with those partners, and because it's really, quite frankly, it's a form of deterrence. And so when it comes to the commercial or industry piece, we work very closely with that, and not just so much in our communications side, but also on the logistics side. And so, it's really important for us to understand what our partners and allies have their capabilities in terms of critical infrastructure. And so we work very closely with that. We try to exercise that and understand that better, as well as reach out to those specific industries. And then finally, when it comes to academia, from a European command perspective, we do quite a bit with Johns Hopkins University, and we've done some things with Lincoln Labs up at with MIT, and that's the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, sorry. So we've done, and having them come in and talk with us and look at some assessments with critical infrastructure. So there's certainly, whether it's industry or academia, very much are key players in that. We also have several long-standing relationships with the National Defense University, also out of Fort McNair. That's out of the DoD in Washington, D.C.
Thanks. Francesco.
Yes, thank you for this. The beauty of being part of the cyber community is you belong to an ecosystem where it's not just a matter of being specialized in cyber. You need to communicate with different environments, which is, if you are a university, it's not just a matter of computer science. It's also psychology, anthropology, social study, and so on and so on. So I think the best example of collaboration comes from what the Admiral called in SACT, the FFCI, the Framework for Collaborative Initiative. So what we have done in Italy, like SACT does in the world, especially in the MCDC series, the Multi-Capability Development Campaign, we take hand by hand an idea and support the industry, expert in that part, and get together with universities so that with the research, we deploy the best solution at that time for it. We military refine the idea, and so we probably come out with the best procurement. And because I said you need to build your own command and control. Also, I think a consideration to bring in is the role of the Center of Excellences. Let's not forget SACT has more than 20 Center of Excellence around the world. So if it's really an ecosystem, then there's need to be communication among all the Center of Excellence who can participate. I'm thinking about modeling and simulation, security force assistance, or C2 Center of Excellence, and so on, so that we pick the best from every single area of expertise. So thanks a lot to SACT, the great job they do with these new solutions in the multinational domain.
Very good. We're going to open up to questions in just 1 minute. I'm going to do one last final question for my German and Italian teammates. The U.S. has talked about the role that Cyber Command played in the election process. Europe has just finished an EU election cycle this week, as a matter of fact. I'm just curious for my German and my Italian teammates, did you have any role in election security in your respective nations, or no, was that outside your responsibility?
In Germany, it's not my responsibility, it's under Minister of Interior.
It's not my responsibility as a military command, but I'm part of the cyber system in Italy. There was a particular attention. I have no report. I was here. They probably called yesterday in the office.
Check. And with that, we have 10 minutes left. Let's open it up to questions. Any questions for the panel? I see one about third row back on that side over there.
Good morning, ma'am, gentlemen. Thank you for coming and speaking to us today. So you mentioned applying traditional military tactics and understanding to cyberspace. So my question is, how can NATO deny our potential adversaries freedom of maneuver and impose cost on them, as well as dictate the tempo of these battles and conflicts when capabilities and defensive lines are dynamic?
Any of the three? Give them a yes or no.
I'd go.
Okay,
I'd go before I forget the answer. And, I think the matter is just, lately in the past few years in the conferences we have seen, we have associated deterrence to a great defense of the system more than offensive. We need to continue in that because someone else will build a higher level than the wall itself. And so someone is always going to be able to go through the lines of defense. I think what really we need to do is info sharing. We have had this discussion yesterday at the Cyber Commander Forum, which means a neighbor watch program where you can tell your ally and friend what is happening in your networks and share this experience with the others. Because for sure someone else will be infected by these intrusions because there's a proxy approach to the network warfare. So info sharing, I think, is the key solution.
Key.
I agree with that, and I would also add talking with a common vocabulary, a common lexicon, which NATO is working on doing for cyberspace operations specifically, because just like we saw a little bit yesterday, even different words mean different things to different nations when it comes to cyberspace. And I just to foot stomp what my colleague said is, defense is deterrence in this area. And we have to have a common defense, a common cyber posture. And that's why I think situational awareness is so important, and as well as the information sharing.
Ludwig? No, okay.
That's fine,
okay.
I think.
Next question. And I see one, we'll go towards the back a little bit.
Is it on? All right. Hi, thank you very much. Stefan Susanto, senior researcher from the ETH Zurich. My question is for Maria or Mike. What defense posture in cyberspace would you like to see your European allies adopt? Or as differently, should the Germans and Italians be able to defend forward in US infrastructure? And a quick yes and no question, if I may.
This is one question with 5 parts, right?
Does neutrality exist for you in cyberspace? Meaning, is there a green space in cyberspace? Thanks.
So you can pick any one of the 4 questions I thought I heard asked. Pick the one that you like.
So I think it goes back to a common, defensive posture and understanding situational awareness. We all nations are sovereign nations with laws and national laws and policies and governance. And so I think it's important that we have some level of commonality. It might not be the same in Italy as it is in Germany, potentially, or in the US. But that's okay, as long as we have some commonality and we have common situational awareness on the defense side. And again, I think that's why the information sharing is so important. And I stress it's information, it's not intelligence sharing. So I think that's how we can get after that.
Next question. We'll try right up front.
Thank you. My question is about the collaboration between the military space and companies. But not so much companies helping the military space, but the opposite. So we know that the majority of attacks are actually on companies. And I believe that the military could have a role in defending companies from attacks. Do you have any policy on that?
So thoughts? Please, Francesco.
I'm going to use the yes and no card, yes. We are applying this approach. Also, kind of answering to the other question and give you the real answer to what you asked. As a cyber commander, a military cyber commander, what I really want is a permanent role in the watch room. I want to know everything that is happening right there. As a fighter pilot, I would never enter a fight without knowing who is there. Enemies, friends, allies, everything, and so on. So I need a permanent radar on the networks. If I have that, then I think I need to guide the industry and the academia in designing my real tool to do cyber operation. And I'm doing this with a close connection with industry and explain them clearly every single details of the capability I want in every single sector.
Anyone else?
Yeah, just briefly, in Germany, the responsibility to defend the networks of industries or to protect the industries is responsibility in the first place of industry itself. And of course, There's an office under the Minister of Interior, the Federal Office for IT Security, that is providing some guidance, also some commitments that they have to do. If there's something happening of a certain scale, they have to report certain things to the government. But it's a responsibility of the organization itself first to protect it.
Time for one more question. We'll go towards the back here.
Members of the panel, my name is Kevin Dupuy from the United States Military Academy, and I was hoping you could explain how a state analyzes the proportionality of a response to a cyber attack, given the disparity in nature and effect of different attacks. Thank you.
So proportionality. Comments? Ludwig.
Yeah, I think there's a decision by the heads of states at NATO that also a cyber attack can cause an Article 5 situation. Mm-hmm. That does not mean that a cyber attack has to be answered with a cyber attack, but it's all possible actions possible, starting with diplomatic actions, economic actions, cyber actions, or even use of kinetic. So this is not a one-to-one relationship. It's open if such a threshold is reached by a cyber attack.
Mm-hmm. Any other?
This is the topic of the area, and as ASA probably will take a couple of years to define every single response. This study is on the table. I think we need to prepare first capability, how to respond, and then measure proportionality, which we pretty much don't know yet, how we can cause collateral effects.
And I'd only make one comment, having participated in discussions in the US with our national leadership as we were thinking about how we were going to respond, Sony, NotPetya, other incidents. We used, my input always was we should use the exact same framework for proportionality in the cyber world that we do in the physical world. There shouldn't be difference. We should use a standard methodology here, and clearly the legal and policy framework is going to be very critical here. With that, I'd like to thank the panel. Thank you very, very much for a very comprehensive and very straightforward dialogue. To the audience, thank you very much for some great questions. Thank you.